Tonight, we're stepping back into a time where survival wasn't a right. It was a rare privilege. Forget the fairy tales of noble knights and grand feasts. Castles weren't sparkling fortresses of romance, but cold, drafty stone prisons. The Middle Ages, a time romanticized by films and fiction, was in truth a brutal, relentless test of endurance. A world where most people didn't aspire to greatness. They aspired to stay alive until tomorrow. This was an age where life expectancy hovered painfully low, where disease was a constant companion, and the simple act of existing came with its own daily gauntlet of suffering. The truth is stark. Medieval Europe was not designed for your comfort, nor your survival. For the average peasant, life was a cycle of toil, hunger, sickness, and fear. Even the privileged weren't safe. Wealth might buy you a thicker cloak or better bread, but it couldn't shield you from the infections lurking in every scratch, or the political betrayals simmering behind every banquet hall. Death did not discriminate, but it certainly had favorites, and peasants topped the list. If you think you could have braved those times with modern grit and a back-to-basics mindset, think again. This wasn't a rustic getaway or a medieval fair. This was a world where the water wanted to poison you, the weather aimed to destroy you, and your own body could betray you from the inside out. There was no clean water, no effective medicine, no safety nets. One misstep, one unlucky winter, one infection from a simple cut, and your story ended there, forgotten, buried shallow under the same dirt you had labored in your entire life. Even waking up was a small victory. Your home was not a sanctuary, but a wooden hut shared with family, livestock, parasites, and a symphony of unholy smells. The floor beneath you was dirt, the roof above you leaked, and privacy was an alien concept. You didn't rise to meet the day. You crawled out of discomfort into a new set of miseries, each more inventive than the last. And yet, this was reality for millions. This was normal. Daily life was a brutal balancing act between starvation and disease, between violent lords and indifferent nature. There were no shortcuts, no miracle cures, no escape. If you were born poor, you died poor, likely in the same village, in the same hut, within a few feet of where you were born. So tonight, we'll walk through what it meant to be alive, truly alive, in medieval Europe. Not the Hollywood version with gallant sword fights and chivalrous duels, but the version history often softens. One day, that's all we ask. Could you survive one day in a world where life was cheap, but suffering was abundant? By the end of this journey, you might be surprised how quickly that answer turns into a very uncomfortable no. Welcome to the Dark Ages. You won't be staying long. Morning has arrived, though you wouldn't call it that. There's no gentle sunrise peeking through your curtains, no soft alarm coaxing you awake. Instead, your day begins with the cold. Not a refreshing chill, but a bone-deep, unrelenting cold that seeps through the gaps in your wooden walls, through the thatched roof that's more hole than cover, and settles into your very bones. You're 22 years old, yet you creak and groan like an old oak door. Your joints pop and grind as you shift, each movement a small betrayal of how broken your body already feels. In medieval Europe, 22 is middle-aged. You don't age gracefully. You erode. Your bed, if you're feeling generous with the term, is a half-rotted sack stuffed with straw that crackles ominously when you move. It's less a place of rest and more a living ecosystem. Fleas, lice, and other biting nuisances thrive here, feeding off your warmth, your blood, and your resignation. The straw is damp, mixed with dust, dirt, and the occasional feather or twig. whatever was nearby when it was hastily assembled. A mattress is a luxury. Yours was a gift from the floor of a barn, likely after the livestock had finished with it. You're not alone, not even close. Personal space is a privilege no one in your class can afford. You share this one-room hut with your family, perhaps 2-3 generations cramped together, plus the essential livestock, a goat, a chicken, maybe even a pig if times are good. Their warmth is your only heating, their smell your constant companion. There's no such thing as a bedroom. Everyone sleeps in a huddled, tangled mass of limbs, snoring mouths, and scratching fingers. You know your cousin's snoring cadence better than you know your own thoughts. There are no sheets, no blankets fresh from the wash, just a rough wool cover that weighs far more than it should, heavy with months, if not years, of accumulated filth, grease, and the faint but ever-present odor of mildew. Washing it is a logistical nightmare. Water is scarce, soap is expensive, and time is never on your side. Besides, after this long, it feels almost protective, a grimy shield against the equally grim world outside. Light filters in weakly through a small opening in the wall, not a window, just a hole covered with oiled cloth or thin wood. The sun, when it chooses to grace you, does little to combat the pervasive dampness. Everything feels moist. The air, the floor, your clothes, even your own skin. You can hear the village stirring, muffled voices, the bleating of goats, the metallic clang of someone already starting their day's labor. There's no time to stretch luxuriously or enjoy a slow morning. Comfort is not part of the schedule. With a reluctant groan, you swing your legs off the straw pile, immediately regretting the decision as your feet meet the icy, uneven dirt floor. It's either slick with mud from last night's rain or crusted with God knows what from the livestock's nightly wanderings. Hygiene is an abstract concept here. You do your best not to think about it. This is how your day begins. Not with coffee, not with calm, but with cold filth and a quiet acceptance that it's only going to get worse from here. Welcome to your medieval morning. When nature calls in medieval Europe, it doesn't whisper politely. It roars, demanding attention in the most inconvenient and unsanitary of ways. You'd be forgiven for assuming the worst part of your day would be the back-breaking labor or the constant threat of disease. But no. Sometimes, the simple act of relieving yourself is the most degrading ordeal you'll face. There are no toilets here, no porcelain thrones, no soft rolls of paper waiting nearby. The medieval answer to your bodily functions is a grim mixture of improvisation, filth, and public spectacle. For a peasant, your bathroom is typically a wooden bucket, if you're lucky. This bucket is tucked behind the house, though behind is a relative term when your entire dwelling is the size of a modern studio apartment. The bucket is rarely, if ever, empty. It's already heaving with the collective offerings of your family, and perhaps even your neighbors. Sanitation isn't a concern. The smell is biblical, an assault on the senses so profound it makes your eyes water before you even approach. But the bucket is only part of the journey. Once filled, its contents must be disposed of. And here, medieval creativity truly shines in its horror. The standard method? Toss it into the street. Yes, the same narrow, dirt-packed lanes where people walk, where children play, where livestock roam. There's even a charming custom of shouting, "Gardez l'eau," a distorted echo of the French for "watch out for the water," as a half-hearted warning before you fling your waste out the window. Few are quick enough to dodge it. Streets quickly become sluggish rivers of human and animal filth, a fetid brew that winds its way through every village and town. In more civilized towns, you might find public latrines, long benches with holes suspended over open pits. But don't expect privacy. You'll be shoulder to shoulder with strangers, conducting your most personal business in full view. The smell is suffocating, ventilation is a myth, and conversation, however forced, is common. Everyone is in the same miserable situation, bonded by the shared indignity of it all. For those living in castles, surely things are better, right? Only marginally. Enter the guardrobe, a small stone cubby protruding from the castle wall, with a hole carved straight through to the outside world. Waste falls directly into the moat below, turning what was once a defensive feature into a festering cesspool. Worse still, enemy soldiers are known to exploit these waste chutes as entry points during sieges. Imagine being breached through your own latrine. There's a poetic kind of humiliation in that. And toilet paper? A fantasy. Most people make do with straw, moss, rags, or whatever nature provides. Leaves are popular until winter strips the trees bare. In moments of rare indulgence, a scrap of wool might be used. Often, nothing at all. Handshakes are not a thing, for obvious reasons. Every bathroom trip is a calculated risk. One wrong step on a slick cobblestone, and you'll find yourself face first in humanity's leftovers. Infection is a constant threat, and yet, this is simply life. You get used to it. You have no choice. In the grand scheme of medieval miseries, toileting is a perfect metaphor. Filthy, public, degrading, and entirely unavoidable. Welcome to the reality of answering nature's call when nature is actively trying to ruin you. Breakfast in medieval Europe isn't about energy or pleasure. It's not a comforting ritual to ease you into the day. It's survival, plain and punishing. You won't find sizzling bacon, fluffy eggs, or even a decent crust of toast here. Instead, your first meal of the day is more of an obligation, an edible endurance test designed to keep you just barely alive. Welcome to the world of pottage, the medieval staple that makes modern-day leftovers look gourmet. Pottage isn't so much cooked as it is continuously reheated. It's a thick, sludgy stew, a catch-all of whatever could be foraged, begged, or scraped together. Root vegetables like turnips or parsnips form the base, bulked up with grains when available. Any beans or peas you can spare get thrown in too, but only if you're lucky. There's no recipe, no variety. The same pot has been bubbling for days, sometimes weeks, with new ingredients simply added on top of whatever's already fermenting at the bottom. If a mouse drowned in it overnight, well, that's extra protein. On the side, you're treated to a hunk of bread so dense and unforgiving, it could double as a blunt weapon. Made from coarse rye or barley flour, this bread is often mixed with fillers, sawdust, ground acorns, even chalk, to stretch scarce supplies. Wheat bread is a luxury reserved for those with land and titles. For peasants, each bite is a dental assault, demanding more effort than the calories it provides. You don't slice this bread. You gnaw on it, chip away at it, negotiate with it. Your teeth, already in a state of medieval disrepair, protest with every chew. As for what you'll wash this grim meal down with, forget about water. The village well might look picturesque, but every bucket drawn is a gamble. Contaminated with waste, parasites, and the occasional dead animal. Drinking water is a fast track to dysentery, or worse. So instead, you drink beer. Not the hoppy artisan kind, beloved by modern enthusiasts, but a weak, cloudy ale with barely enough alcohol to notice. This small beer is safer than water, boiled during brewing to kill off pathogens, making it the breakfast beverage of choice for peasants, children included. At 6 in the morning, your tankard is filled not out of luxury, but necessity. And if you're imagining a hearty slab of meat or a wedge of cheese to round out this rustic tableau, think again. Meat is a rare treat, reserved for feast days or the occasional windfall of a dead animal. Cheese, when available, is often hard, salty, and as much a preservation gamble as a delicacy. Spices are a fantasy. Even salt is precious, carefully rationed, and often locked away to prevent theft. So you sit, crouched by the fading embers of last night's fire, spooning sludge into your mouth, gnawing on a bread brick, and sipping weak beer. Breakfast doesn't prepare you for the day. It doesn't invigorate. It simply happens to you. A daily reminder that in medieval Europe, survival is not a victory. It's a slow, grinding negotiation, and you haven't even started working yet. Getting dressed in medieval Europe isn't about self-expression, fashion, or even comfort. It's about not being naked. You own exactly one outfit, and that's not an exaggeration. One tunic, one shift, maybe a second layer if you're considered fortunate, and you wear it every single day, through every season, until it physically falls apart. By then, it's less clothing and more a second skin. A filthy, tattered husk that holds your dignity together with frayed seams and pure stubbornness. Your primary garment is a coarse wool tunic, heavy and scratchy, designed less for comfort and more for sheer durability. Wool is the fabric of the poor. It's itchy in the summer, suffocating in the heat, and woefully inadequate against the cold. Beneath that, you might have a linen undertunic, though that's optimistic. Many simply go without. Underwear, as a concept, is optional at best. Going commando beneath layers of abrasive fabric is the norm, and with every step, the friction reminds you of this grim reality. There's no such thing as seasonal attire. You don't swap your wardrobe when the weather turns. You simply endure. In the winter, you freeze. In the summer, you stew in your own sweat, trapped beneath heavy wool that clings to your body like a damp, abrasive shroud. Your clothes don't breathe. They suffocate, and you suffocate with them. Shoes are a luxury most peasants can't afford. If you're lucky, you might own a pair of crude leather shoes, thin, barely stitched, and offering as much protection as a damp piece of bark. They wear through quickly, becoming more symbolic than functional. For many, bare feet are simply a fact of life. You walk through mud, dung, sharp rocks, and worse, your soul's hardened, not by design, but by relentless abuse. Every step is a negotiation with the ground beneath you. As for cleanliness, forget it. Soap exists, but it's expensive, time-consuming to make, and reserved for special occasions, if at all. Washing your clothes involves hauling water from a stream or well, boiling it over a fire, scrubbing the fabric against rough wooden boards with ashes or lye, and hoping the weather cooperates long enough to dry them. This isn't a weekend chore. It's an ordeal. Most people simply don't bother unless absolutely necessary. The result? Your clothes are stiff with dirt, sweat, and layers of accumulated filth. They smell of smoke, mold, and human grime. And then there are the inhabitants of your clothing you didn't invite. Lice, fleas, and bedbugs. They thrive in the folds of your tunic, biting, crawling, feeding. It's a constant itch, a never-ending battle against tiny parasites that treat your body as an all-you-can-eat buffet. You scratch until your skin is raw, until you're numb to the sensation. No one bats an eye. Everyone is infested. Nobles might have silk, but they have lice too. Getting dressed doesn't make you feel prepared. It reminds you that your skin is no longer yours. The fabric chafes, the seams dig into your flesh, and every movement is a reminder that comfort is a luxury medieval Europe never intended you to have. This is not clothing. This is a uniform of suffering, and you'll be wearing it for the rest of your short, miserable life. In medieval Europe, your smile is less a sign of health and happiness, and more a grim reflection of how much rot your mouth can endure before it kills you. Dental hygiene as we know it doesn't exist. There are no toothbrushes, no toothpaste, no dental floss. Mouthwash is a foreign concept. If you're lucky, you might occasionally chew on a frayed twig or rinse with vinegar or wine. But for most, oral care begins and ends with doing nothing at all. Teeth are left to fend for themselves, and unsurprisingly, they lose that battle spectacularly. By your 20s, your teeth are already a disaster zone. Cavities run rampant, each one a festering cavern of rot and pain. Your gums are swollen, red, and constantly bleeding. You've never heard of gingivitis, but you're living it in real time. Every bite of food is a gamble. Something as simple as a stale hunk of bread could send a lightning bolt of agony through your jaw. You might even avoid chewing on one side of your mouth entirely, not out of strategy, but out of sheer necessity. And the smell. Your breath isn't just unpleasant. It's a weapon. Halitosis is so common, so pervasive, that people don't even bother to comment on it. The air is thick with the stench of rotting teeth and infected gums. In fact, the custom of kissing in greetings or handshakes never really catches on, and now you understand why. If you think relief is just a village apothecary away, think again. Dentists, as a profession, barely exist. In their place stands the barber surgeon, a man whose primary qualifications are owning sharp tools and a tolerance for blood. The same hands that trim beards and hack off limbs are responsible for your dental care. There are no sterile instruments, no anesthetic, no antiseptic. If you have a toothache, the solution is simple. They yank it out. A pair of iron tongs, a steady foot on your chest, and a sharp, painful twist. Infection after the fact? That's your problem. A toothache is not a minor inconvenience. It can escalate into a life-threatening condition. Without antibiotics, an infected tooth can lead to abscesses, blood poisoning, and a slow, agonizing death. What would send you running to a dentist today was, back then, a one-way ticket to the grave. People literally died from their teeth rotting in their mouths. Even the wealthy, with their imported sugar and honeyed treats, suffer from rapid dental decay. In fact, the upper classes rot their teeth faster than the peasants, who can't afford such indulgences. The difference is, the rich have access to better pain relief, namely, wine and opium. For everyone else, there's nothing but stoicism and the occasional home remedy, most of which involve herbs, prayers, or superstition. Your mouth is a battlefield, and you are losing. Every morning you wake up, you accept the dull throb in your jaw as part of life, another constant ache in a body that's slowly falling apart. A smile isn't a sign of joy. It's a grimace of endurance, a reminder that even your teeth are conspiring against you. In medieval Europe, a toothache isn't a dental issue. It's a death sentence with a painfully slow countdown. From the moment the first sliver of pale light breaches the horizon, your life as a medieval peasant is defined by one brutal, unrelenting truth. You work or you die. Leisure is a word you've never heard, and rest is a luxury you simply can't afford. Your days are an endless loop of back-breaking labor, starting before dawn and dragging on until the sun sinks below the treetops. Then you sleep just long enough to do it all again. There's no clock in, no clock out. The rhythm of your life is dictated by the seasons, the weather, and the whims of the land. Fields don't wait. Crops don't care if your back is broken or your hands are raw. You plow, you sow, you weed, you harvest, all with rudimentary tools that feel like they're designed to punish as much as to work. A wooden hoe, a rusty sickle, maybe an ox if your village can spare one. Most of the time, it's just you, your hands, and the unyielding earth. The ground is not your ally. It is a constant adversary, hard, uncooperative, and indifferent to your suffering. Every step through the fields is a gamble against sprained ankles, twisted knees, or worse. Blisters are permanent residents on your palms. Splinters, cuts, and bruises are daily companions. You ignore them because there's no alternative. Stopping is not an option. If you don't till the fields, there's no food. And if there's no food, there's no future. Hunger is a more efficient taskmaster than any lord. Speaking of lords, none of this land belongs to you. Every furrow you carve, every seed you plant, every sheaf you gather goes to the manor first. You keep what's left, which is never enough. Taxes, tithes, and rents bleed you dry, long before the harvest reaches your table. You are not working to build a life. You are working to survive the week. And there's always next week, and the one after that. There are no weekends. The medieval concept of days off is reserved for saints' feast days, and even then, you're expected to attend Mass, tend to chores, and participate in community obligations. It's a different kind of labor, but labor all the same. Illness doesn't grant you rest either. Feverish? You work. Injured? You limp your way through it. If you stop, you starve. It's that simple. For women, the burden is doubled. Not only are they out in the fields alongside the men, but they're also responsible for the relentless grind of domestic work: cooking, cleaning, child-rearing, spinning wool, fetching water, and keeping the household from collapsing into chaos. Their labor is constant, invisible, and entirely expected. Children, too, are drafted into the workforce as soon as they can lift a tool. By the age of 5 or 6, they're out in the fields, mimicking the toil of their elders, their tiny hands blistering just the same. Retirement is a fairy tale. You don't retire in medieval Europe. You simply work until your body fails. A bent spine, crippled joints, and failing eyesight are not reasons to stop. They're just new obstacles to endure. Only when death claims you do, you finally rest. In this world, labor isn't a path to prosperity. It's the price of existence, and you pay it, day after grinding day, until there's nothing left of you but the calluses on your hands and the imprint of your toil on the land you never owned. In medieval Europe, being a woman doesn't spare you from the crushing demands of labor. In fact, it doubles them. You rise as early as the men, face the same brutal fields, wield the same crude tools, and when the sun sets, your work is only halfway done. For peasant women, every day is a relentless cycle of physical exhaustion, domestic drudgery, and the ever-present shadow of childbirth. There are no accolades, no recognition, no gratitude. This is simply your role: to endure, to serve, to suffer in silence. You work the fields alongside your husband, your father, your brothers. The same mud sucks at your boots. The same sharp stones bruise your feet. You stoop for hours, pulling weeds, gathering crops, your back screaming with each motion. There's no special consideration for your gender. Labor is labor, and survival doesn't care about your anatomy. The land takes what it's owed from everyone. When the men finally trudge home, their work for the day is considered done. Yours is not. You tend to the children, feeding, cleaning, nursing, disciplining. You prepare what little food the household has, often after scavenging for firewood or hauling water from a distant well. The hearth, the so-called heart of the home, is your kingdom, but it's not a place of comfort. It's smoke-filled, cramped, and suffocating. You spin wool, patch clothing, mend tools, sweep dirt floors that refuse to stay clean. Every surface, every task is a reminder that your labor is invisible, expected, and endless. Childbirth is perhaps the greatest ordeal of all. There's no medical care, no sterile environment, no pain relief. Midwives do what they can with herbs, whispered prayers, and calloused hands. But every birth is a gamble. Miscarriages are common. Infant mortality is heartbreakingly routine. And maternal death looms with every contraction. You face the possibility of dying in childbirth multiple times in your short life, and there's no insurance policy, no safety net. You survive if you're lucky. You die if you're not. Either outcome is met with the same stoic acceptance. And yet, fertility is your primary value in this society. You're expected to produce heirs, farmhands, future workers. Your worth is tied to your womb, not your will. If you fail to conceive, or if you lose too many children to the grim lottery of medieval mortality, whispers of blame follow you. Superstition fills the gaps where knowledge is absent. A barren woman is cursed. A woman who births daughters instead of sons is unlucky. A woman who speaks too loudly or acts too independently risks being labeled a witch. There are no holidays from this life, no moments where you are allowed to exist outside of service to others. Even in sickness, you rise. Even in grief, you work. Your hands never rest. Your body is never your own. It belongs to the land, to your family, to your Lord, and to the relentless expectations of a world designed to take until there's nothing left. In medieval Europe, a woman's life is not measured in achievements or accolades. It is measured in how much she can endure before she breaks. And the world never stops asking for more. In medieval Europe, childhood as you know it simply doesn't exist. There are no carefree years of exploration, no toys scattered across the floor, no school bells ringing in the morning. From the moment a child can stand on their own 2 feet, they are expected to contribute. By 5 or 6 years old, you are not a child in the modern sense. You are a worker, a tiny cog in the relentless machine of medieval survival. Your days begin alongside your parents, rising with the dawn, wiping sleep from your eyes, not to prepare for play, but to ready yourself for labor. There are no allowances for your age, no consideration for your size. Tasks are assigned based on what your small hands can manage. You might start by shoeing chickens, herding geese, gathering firewood, or fetching water from a distant well. These chores are not optional. They are essential. Every family member must pull their weight because survival is a collective effort. As you grow, the tasks grow with you. By the age of 7 or 8, you're in the fields, stooping beside your elders, yanking stubborn weeds, scattering seeds, or swinging a child-sized hoe. The work is physically grueling, but no one asks if you're tired. Tired is irrelevant. You do what's necessary because there's no other option. The fields need tending, the animals need feeding, and the endless cycle of labor never pauses for sentiment. There's no education waiting for you. Literacy is a rare luxury reserved for the children of nobles or clergy. Your lessons come in the form of repetitive, grinding tasks. You learn to patch roofs, mend fences, prepare meals, spin wool, and care for livestock. Not because you're curious, but because you must. Life skills are not taught in the hopes of personal development. They are survival tools, passed down in urgency rather than patience. Toys are a fantasy. If you have anything resembling playthings, They are improvised from sticks, stones, and scraps. A carved piece of wood might serve as a doll. A bone could become a rudimentary game piece. But playtime is fleeting, snatched in rare, stolen moments between chores. Fun is not scheduled. It's squeezed into the cracks of your labor-filled day. Illness does not spare you. A feverish child still tends goats. A bruised or scraped knee is simply ignored. There are no doctors, no sick days, no time to heal. If you're too ill to work, it's a sign you might not survive the season. And yet, in this harsh reality, you are not pitied. You are fulfilling your role, just as your parents did, and their parents before them. Childhood is a brief, harsh apprenticeship into a life of toil. The concept of growing up is not marked by milestones of learning and discovery, but by how quickly you can shoulder the burdens of adulthood. In medieval Europe, you don't get to be a child. You get to be small, useful, and tired. That's the extent of your childhood, and for many, that's all there ever is. If you think escaping the fields for a trade in medieval Europe means you've found an easier life, think again. Skilled labor might spare you the endless monotony of farming, but it introduces you to a new realm of suffering, one that's hotter, filthier, and in many cases, far more dangerous. Being a blacksmith, tanner, cooper, or miller doesn't elevate you. It just gives you a different set of ways to get maimed, poisoned, or crushed. Take the blacksmith, for instance. Romanticized today as a noble craftsman, hammering out swords and horseshoes. In reality, it's a brutal, punishing existence. Your workshop is a small inferno, choked with smoke and the stench of sweat and scorched metal. Every swing of the hammer is a battle against the raw materials. You're burned constantly. Minor burns aren't even noticed, while serious ones are simply treated with rags and hope. The forge roasts you alive in summer and gives no warmth in winter when the fire refuses to stay lit. Sparks scar your skin. Molten iron can maim you in seconds, and the constant pounding deafens you before middle age. Your lungs blacken with soot long before your hair turns gray. And then there's the tanner, perhaps the most wretched job of them all. Leather is essential, but turning animal hides into usable material is a process that would make even the strongest stomach churn. Skins are soaked in vats of urine and water, marinated in animal dung, and finally treated with noxious chemicals like lime and alum. The smell is indescribable, a nauseating mix of decay, excrement, and chemical rot that clings to your clothes, your skin, even your breath. No one wants to live near the tanners. Their workshops are relegated to the outskirts of town, as far downwind as possible. Yet someone has to do it. And once you start, your chances of leaving the trade, and its stench, behind, are slim. Coopers, those who craft barrels, seem at first glance to have a more respectable trade, but their work is no less grueling. Shaping staves of wood into perfect cylindrical forms requires immense strength and precision. Tools are sharp and unforgiving. A single slip can cost you a finger, maybe a hand. Barrels are heavy, awkward, and dangerous to maneuver. Your back bends under their weight until it simply stops straightening altogether. Millers face the constant threat of machinery turning against them. Giant grinding stones powered by water or wind are merciless. Accidents are frequent, and there are no safety measures. A sleeve caught in the gears can mean instant amputation, or worse. The fine dust from grain clogs your lungs, leading to a chronic hacking cough that never fully goes away. None of these trades are paths to wealth or comfort. They are merely different flavors of misery. The work is ceaseless, the hazards are numerous, and the rewards are meager. You might earn slightly more than a farmhand, but it's paid for with your health, your limbs, and your life expectancy. In medieval Europe, the concept of skilled labor comes with no prestige, no relief from suffering. Whether you swing a hammer, scrape hides, or shape wood, your trade is just another way for the world to grind you down. You've traded one form of hardship for another, and suffering remains the only constant. In medieval Europe, the weather is not a backdrop to your life. It's an active, relentless enemy. It doesn't politely inconvenience you. It wages war on your body, your home, and your fragile grip on survival. With no insulation, no central heating, and no real means of sheltering yourself, every season feels like it was designed to punish you personally. Winter is merciless. Your home, if you can call it that, is a timber-framed hut with gaps wide enough to let in not just the wind, but entire drafts of icy air. The walls do little more than outline where the cold ends and your suffering begins. Windows are a luxury. More often, you have small slits covered with oiled cloth that barely keep the worst of the elements out. The hearth is your only source of warmth, but firewood is scarce and expensive. Gathering it from the surrounding forests isn't as simple as picking up a few sticks. In many places, it's illegal. Forests are property of the Lord, and taking wood can earn you a fine, or worse, so you burn what you can. Animal dung, peat, scraps of wood too rotten to be useful. The fire smolders more than it burns, filling your one-room home with choking smoke. You huddle close, wrapped in the same damp, filthy woolen tunic you wear all year, while your breath forms clouds in the frigid air. Frost creeps inside. Your fingers stiffen until they feel like brittle sticks, and your feet are perpetually cold, damp, and cracked. Frostbite isn't a diagnosis. It's just called life. But if you think relief comes with spring, you're mistaken. Summer simply swaps one form of torture for another. The same house that couldn't keep out the cold now traps every ounce of heat. The air becomes thick, stifling, suffocating. There are no fans, no cross breezes, no linen sheets to cool you. The heavy wool you're forced to wear turns into a mobile sweat lodge. You can't remove layers without scandalizing your neighbors and inviting judgment, or sunburn, which is as vicious as it is inevitable. The insects return in swarms. Flies buzz incessantly, drawn to the filth you're forced to live in. Mosquitoes feast on any exposed skin. There's no insect repellent, no netting. You're on the menu, and they're never full. The stench of sweat, unwashed bodies, and decaying waste is inescapable, a constant cloud that sticks to you as the sun bakes your world into a reeking clay oven. Rain is no blessing either. Your thatched roof leaks with the first drizzle, and soon the dirt floor beneath you turns to muck. Puddles form indoors, soaking your bedding, your clothes, your bones. Mold grows freely. Nothing dries. The damp becomes a permanent feature of your life, creeping into your joints, feeding every ache. Spring and autumn are brief, unpredictable interludes, more of a cruel tease than a reprieve. The weather shifts from cold to hot, wet to dry, with no warning. One day you're sweating through your clothes. The next, you're shivering as the temperature plunges. In a world without modern comforts, the weather is not a topic of small talk. It is a daily assault on your body and spirit. You endure it because you have no choice. There is no shelter strong enough, no clothing fine enough, no fire large enough to keep it at bay. In medieval Europe, the weather is not just the environment. It is a constant, merciless adversary, and it always wins. In medieval Europe, water is not your friend. It's not a refreshing drink. It's not a cleansing ritual. It is, quite simply, trying to kill you. Every sip, every wash, every drop you come into contact with carries the quiet threat of disease. The streams that look so picturesque, winding through your village, they double as open sewers. Upstream, someone's emptied a chamber pot. A little further along, a dead animal rots slowly, its bloated carcass leaking into the current. You drink from it anyway, because there is no other choice. Wells aren't much better. Dug by hand, often shallow and poorly maintained, they become repositories for every manner of filth. Parasites, bacteria, and unknown horrors lurk beneath the surface. This is why beer, not water, is your daily drink. Not the hearty, high-alcohol craft brews you're imagining, but a thin, weak ale known as small beer. It's barely alcoholic, just strong enough to be safer than water, thanks to the boiling process in brewing. Adults drink it. Children drink it. It's not for celebration. It's for survival. Wine serves the same purpose for the wealthy, but it's expensive and often imported. So the average peasant turns to beer by necessity, not by choice. It's not uncommon to start your day with a mug of it, not for the taste, but because it might keep you alive until nightfall. Bathing, meanwhile, is considered a risky endeavor. The prevailing belief is that warm water opens your pores, leaving you vulnerable to disease seeping in. Cleanliness, ironically, is thought to be a health hazard. A layer of dirt and sweat acts as a kind of protective barrier against the miasmas, bad air, blamed for illness. Most people bathe only a handful of times a year, if at all. Communal bathhouses do exist in some towns, but they quickly gain reputations as dens of vice and disease. The church, already wary of anything resembling pleasure, frequently campaigns to shut them down. Even if you wanted to wash, the process is arduous. Water must be fetched by hand, hauled in heavy buckets from streams or wells, then heated laboriously over a fire. The bath itself is a wooden tub, likely shared with family members or leftover livestock, and never quite clean. Once finished, you emerge not refreshed, but merely damp and still coated in the residue of medieval life. Rainwater might seem like a solution, but barrels left out to collect it quickly become breeding grounds for insects and algae. Hygiene, as a concept, exists only in the most rudimentary sense. You might rinse your face occasionally or wash your hands after particularly filthy tasks, but soap is a luxury. Made from animal fat and lye, it's harsh, expensive, and not widely available. For the majority, personal cleanliness is limited to brushing off visible dirt and hoping for the best. In this world, staying clean is not just impractical, it's seen as unnecessary, even dangerous. The very substance that sustains life in theory is the source of unrelenting misery in practice. You can't avoid water entirely, but every interaction with it is a gamble. In medieval Europe, water is less a source of life and more a quiet, persistent assassin. And there's no antidote. When illness strikes in medieval Europe, you quickly learn that the so-called cure might be worse than the disease. There's no germ theory, no concept of bacteria or viruses. Instead, medicine revolves around the ancient and entirely misguided theory of the four humors. Your body, they believe, is a delicate stew of blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Health is simply a matter of keeping these in balance. Sickness, therefore, means your internal soup is off. The solution? Force it back into harmony, through methods that sound suspiciously like torture. The most popular treatment is bloodletting. Feeling feverish? Clearly you have too much blood. The remedy is simple. Drain it out. Barbers, who double as surgeons, will slice open a vein and let your life slowly drip into a basin. Sometimes they'll use leeches for a more refined approach, allowing these slimy little vampires to latch onto your skin and suck until they're engorged. There's no regard for how weak you already are. The assumption is that less blood equals more health. It rarely works. Cupping is another favorite. Heated glass or metal cups are pressed onto your skin, creating painful suction that's supposed to draw out the offending humors. The result? Large, angry blisters that may or may not become infected. But hey, at least it feels like something is happening. If your problem isn't blood-related, it must be bile or phlegm. Laxatives and emetics are administered liberally. Are you vomiting uncontrollably? Perfect. That means the treatment is working. Herbal concoctions, ground beetles, crushed bones, and whatever other exotic ingredients the apothecary can get his hands on are mixed into bitter brews. You're expected to choke them down, no matter the taste or the aftermath. Pain relief, as we understand it, does not exist. There's no anesthesia, no numbing agents, no delicate bedside manner. You grit your teeth and bear it. Surgery, when attempted, is a brutal, unsanitary affair. Tools are crude, rarely cleaned, and used with a forcefulness that borders on brutality. The idea of sterilization is centuries away. Infection is common. Survival is not. Underlying all of this is a moral judgment. Illness is seen not just as a physical ailment, but as a reflection of your character. Sickness might indicate you've sinned, strayed from God, or been targeted by evil spirits. Confession is as important as treatment. Priests might be summoned to administer last rites before the physician even attempts a cure. Prayer is prescribed as often as potions. Astrology also plays its part. The alignment of planets and stars is consulted before any procedure. A bad omen in the sky could delay surgery, even if your condition is critical. Superstition weaves through every aspect of medieval medicine, blurring the line between healing and ritual. In this grim reality, going to a doctor is less about getting better and more about surviving the ordeal of being treated. There's no recovery plan, no follow-up care. You either pull through by sheer luck and resilience, or you don't. And if you die, well, perhaps your humors were just too far out of balance. In medieval Europe, medicine is not a science. It is a gamble, one where the house always wins and the patient always loses. In medieval Europe, your body is always one misstep away from disaster. There are no minor injuries here. A twisted ankle, a deep cut, a broken bone. Any of these can set you on a path toward a slow, agonizing death. Infection lurks behind every scratch, every blister, every unlucky tumble. And the so-called healers you'd hope might save you are often the very ones who seal your fate. There's no such thing as clean tools. A surgeon's kit is little more than a collection of knives, saws, and metal hooks, often stained from the last unfortunate soul who lay on the table. Washing these instruments between patients isn't common practice. Why would it be? Germs are an unknown concept. The prevailing belief is that illness comes from bad air, sinful living, or a cosmic imbalance of your bodily humors. That rusty bone saw? As long as it cuts, it's good enough. Anesthesia, too, is centuries away. If you need a limb set or a wound stitched, the only thing dulling your pain is the amount of ale or wine you can afford to drink beforehand. More often, you're simply held down while the surgeon gets to work. Your screams are considered a normal part of the process. Pain is inevitable. Suffering is expected. A broken leg, for instance, isn't treated with delicate care. If the bone pierces the skin, you're in real trouble. There are no x-rays, no proper splints. Bones are reset with brute force, often resulting in a grotesque misalignment. Infection sets in quickly, as dirt, feces, and bacteria from your environment are introduced into the open wound. There's no penicillin, no antibiotics. If the infection spreads, your only hope is amputation, a procedure done with no pain relief, no sanitation, and no guarantee of survival. Even simple cuts are perilous. A small gash from a farming tool, a slip of the knife while preparing food, a scrape on a jagged stone. Any break in your skin invites infection. A red, swollen wound becomes an abscess. An abscess becomes sepsis. Without intervention, your body's immune response turns lethal. You develop a raging fever, your body swells, your skin darkens. Death follows, slowly, painfully, with no one able to explain why. Boils, ulcers, and gangrene are common sights. The only treatment options involve lancing wounds with filthy instruments, cauterizing flesh with red-hot irons, or applying questionable poultices made from herbs, clay, and animal dung. Amputation, when performed, is done with astonishing speed, not out of mercy, but because prolonging the procedure increases the risk of the patient going into shock or bleeding out entirely. And once you're crippled, life becomes even harder. There are no prosthetics worth mentioning, no rehabilitation, a lost hand, a maimed leg, a blind eye. These are lifelong disabilities in a society that offers no support. You're now a burden on your family, and medieval life has little patience for those who cannot work. In this world, injury is more than a setback. It's a sentence. Every cut threatens your life. Every broken bone whispers of your mortality. There is no safe recovery, no gentle healing process. You either endure by sheer luck and resilience, or you succumb. In medieval Europe, your body isn't protected. It's a fragile, failing machine held together by hope and hard labor. And when it breaks, you break with it. In medieval Europe, food isn't a source of joy or celebration. It's a calculated risk. Every meal you put in your mouth carries the possibility of sickness or death. There's no refrigeration, no expiration dates, and no reliable way to preserve anything beyond a few days. The line between sustenance and poison is razor thin, and more often than not, you'll be forced to cross it out of sheer necessity. Meat, when you can get it, is a prime suspect. Fresh is a luxury few can afford. Animals are slaughtered in summer and salted or smoked in a desperate attempt to stretch their usefulness through the lean months. But salt is expensive, and smoking only slows the inevitable. Without proper preservation, meat rots quickly, especially in the sweltering heat of medieval summers. Slimy textures, off-putting smells, and greenish hues become familiar. Not indicators to discard the food, but signs you should scrape off the worst bits and hope for the best. Bread, the cornerstone of every peasant's diet, offers no more safety. Made from coarse grains, often adulterated with fillers like ground-up acorns or even sawdust, it's heavy, dense, and rarely fresh. If the bread's gone stale, it's softened with beer or broth. Mold is scraped away, but invisible toxins remain. Ergot, a fungus that thrives on damp rye, turns bread into a deadly gamble. Eating ergot-contaminated bread can cause hallucinations, seizures, gangrene, and death. Entire villages have fallen victim to what they called St. Anthony's fire, a horrifying condition that blackens limbs and drives people mad, all from a few mouthfuls of tainted grain. Vegetables aren't much safer. Root crops like turnips and onions keep longer, but are stored in damp, pest-ridden cellars. Rats, mice, and insects nibble at the stores, contaminating what's left. Fresh greens are seasonal and rare, and when foraged from the wild, they carry their own risks. Misidentifying a plant can turn a simple salad into a lethal mistake. Dairy products, milk, butter, cheese, are consumed in various states of sourness. Spoilage is inevitable. Cheese can last a while, hardening into bricks of pungent, salty survival food. But milk turns quickly, especially in the heat. Drinking it sour is normal. Refusing it is not an option. Fruit is a fleeting luxury. Without modern preservation, it rots within days. What isn't eaten fresh is dried or turned into jam if you have sugar, which is unlikely. More often, overripe fruit is simply consumed as is, with the worms discreetly picked out. Preservation methods are crude and unreliable. Smoking, salting, pickling, these help, but resources are limited and mistakes are common. The communal knowledge of safe storage is imperfect, passed down through trial, error, and tragic accidents. Food poisoning is so common it's barely acknowledged. Stomach cramps, vomiting, and diarrhea are frequent visitors. You eat through the discomfort because you must. Malnutrition is an ever-present threat, making even questionable food better than none at all. In medieval Europe, every bite is a gamble. You don't eat to savor the taste. You eat to stave off starvation, fully aware that what keeps you alive today might kill you tomorrow. Food isn't just scarce. It's an edible threat, one that demands constant vigilance and grim acceptance. In medieval Europe, death is never far away, but nothing brings it closer than the plague. The word itself is enough to make blood run cold. You might be thinking of the Black Death, the infamous pandemic that wiped out nearly half of Europe's population in the 14th century. But the truth is, outbreaks of plague and other deadly diseases are a constant shadow. They come in waves, without warning, and every time they do, life becomes a numbers game. Who gets sick, who survives, and who vanishes into an unmarked grave is left to fate. The people of the time have no concept of germs or bacteria. Disease is a punishment from God, a curse, bad air, or perhaps the result of some neighbor's envy-fueled witchcraft. Without microscopes or science to explain the spread, fear fills the gap. When sickness strikes, people burn incense, carry nosegays, and light fires in the streets, hoping to cleanse the air. They flee cities in blind panic, never realizing they carry the death with them. Quarantine is attempted in the clumsiest of ways, barring sick households, isolating entire villages, but without understanding how infection truly works. These measures are hit or miss. When the plague arrives, it announces itself violently. One day, you feel fine. The next, you're burning with fever, your body racked with chills and convulsions. Buboes, horrifically swollen lymph nodes, bulge grotesquely in your neck, groin, and armpits. They turn black, ooze pus, and fill the air with the stench of decay. As your body shuts down, dark splotches bloom beneath your skin, earning the Black Death its name. Within a matter of days, sometimes even hours, you are dead. But the plague is not alone. Leprosy, smallpox, typhoid, and dysentery are common killers, each claiming their share of lives with ruthless efficiency. Leprosy turns its victims into pariahs, forcing them into isolated colonies marked by bells and rags. Smallpox ravages communities with blistering fevers and scarring pustules. Dysentery, often called the bloody flux, spreads through contaminated water and kills through relentless dehydration and infection. There are no hospitals as we know them. Monasteries offer rudimentary care, but their methods are as likely to harm as to help. Physicians, dressed in their now iconic beaked masks, stuffed with aromatic herbs, might seem prepared, but they are essentially blind to the true nature of disease. Their treatments, bleeding, purging, applying poultices of dubious origin, are rarely effective. For the living, the constant presence of plague reshapes daily life. Funerals are hasty, Mass graves become commonplace, and the tolling of church bells becomes a mournful background to existence. Fear and superstition rule. Entire communities turn on themselves, blaming outsiders, minorities, or the poor for the spread of sickness. Pogroms and persecutions often follow outbreaks, as desperate people seek scapegoats for their suffering. In medieval Europe, the plague is not a once-in-a-lifetime catastrophe. It is a recurring nightmare. It comes and goes with brutal regularity, each time thinning the population, each time reinforcing the brutal lesson that life is fleeting, fragile, and cheap. There is no vaccine, no cure, only the grim hope that this time, death will pass you by. But it rarely does. In medieval Europe, religion isn't a private belief or a Sunday obligation. It's an all-consuming force that dictates every moment of your existence, from the cradle to the grave and beyond. The church is not merely a spiritual guide. It is the government, the court, the school, and the arbiter of morality. It owns land, collects taxes, and commands an authority that no king dares to challenge. Its grip on daily life is absolute, and its influence is inescapable. From the moment you're born, the church claims you. Baptism isn't just a ritual, it's your official entry into both the community and the faith. Without it, you're considered damned before you even take your first steps. As you grow, your days are structured around the bells of the local church. They mark not just services, but the rhythm of life itself. Time is measured in prayers, not hours. Morning, noon, evening, all are dedicated to devotion. Tithes are mandatory. A tenth of everything you earn, grow, or produce goes straight to the church. Even in famine, even when taxes from your feudal lord have bled you dry, the tithe is non-negotiable. To refuse is to risk excommunication, a social and spiritual death sentence that cuts you off from your community and condemns your soul. Confession is not optional. The church teaches that sin is an ever-present threat, lurking in every thought and deed. Pride, envy, sloth, lust. Your very humanity is seen as a constant temptation. You are expected to confess regularly, to bear your sins to a priest who alone holds the power to absolve you. Forgiveness comes at a price, often literal, as indulgences, payments for the remission of sins, become a common and lucrative practice. Hell is no vague concept. It is described in vivid, terrifying detail, with images of eternal fire, demons wielding pitchforks, and ceaseless torment. The church ensures that you understand the stakes. Every misstep, every sin, no matter how small, is painted as a direct path to damnation. The threat of hellfire is not abstract. It is the hammer that keeps you in line. Holy days and saints' festivals punctuate the year, but even these are double-edged. They offer respite from labor, but are laden with religious obligations. Attendance at Mass is compulsory. Public displays of penance, processions, flagellations, pilgrimages are common, especially in times of plague or famine, when divine punishment is assumed to be at hand. The church also polices thought. Heresy, questioning doctrine, or expressing unorthodox beliefs are not intellectual pursuits. They are crimes. Accusations of heresy lead to public trials, torture, and often execution. The Inquisition ensures that dissent is silenced swiftly and brutally. Fear, guilt, and superstition are powerful tools, and the church wields them masterfully. Even in death, the church's reach persists. Burial in consecrated ground requires payment. Prayers for your soul's passage through purgatory are offered, but only if your family can afford them. Without these, you risk languishing in spiritual limbo, trapped between heaven and hell. In medieval Europe, Religion is not a choice. It is the air you breathe, the structure of your society, and the lens through which every event is interpreted. The church's grip is suffocating, its influence absolute. To live is to obey. To doubt is to risk everything. And through it all, the promise of salvation dangles like a carrot just out of reach, always contingent on your unwavering submission. In medieval Europe, being born a woman is a sentence handed down before your first breath. You are not a person in the legal sense. You are property, first of your father, then of your husband, and perhaps, if you survive long enough, of your son. Your value is measured in terms of dowry, fertility, and obedience. Rights are not for you. Choices are not for you. Even your body is not yours to command. Marriage is arranged early, often before puberty. As soon as you are deemed physically capable of bearing children, your family seeks to trade you off to the best advantage. Love is irrelevant. A wedding is a transaction, a transfer of ownership sealed with vows you didn't choose. A girl of 12 or 13 might find herself a wife to a man decades her senior. Consent is never asked, it is assumed. Childbirth becomes your lifelong burden. There are no contraceptives, no understanding of reproductive health. You are expected to produce heirs, laborers, and replacements for the siblings who will inevitably die young. Pregnancy is constant. Miscarriages are common. Stillbirths are frequent. Every labor is a game of Russian roulette with your life at stake. With no medical support beyond the rough hands of a midwife, death in childbirth is so routine it barely raises eyebrows. If you survive one birth, there will be another soon after. Step out of line, however, and the consequences are swift and brutal. Medieval society demands your silence, your submission. A woman who speaks too freely, who challenges male authority, who dares to possess knowledge outside of her expected role, is viewed with suspicion. The label of witch is never far away. Old age, a sharp tongue, or even simple misfortune can be enough to paint you as a consorter with the devil. Once accused, your fate is grim. Trials by ordeal, torture, and execution follow accusations like clockwork. You might be forced to recite impossible prayers, endure drowning tests, or suffer under the thumbscrews, all to prove your innocence. The irony is crushing. The only way to survive is to confess, and even then, survival is not guaranteed. Punishment for women is not just legal, it is cultural. Domestic violence is not a crime. A husband may beat his wife for correction, and few would intervene. Your role is to endure. Your suffering is normalized. In public, humiliations like the scold's bridle, a metal cage fitted over a woman's head to silence her, serve as grim warnings to others. Stocks, whippings, and even branding are punishments meted out for perceived transgressions. Widowhood offers the faintest glimpse of autonomy. Without a husband, a widow can sometimes manage her own affairs, but even this freedom is fragile. The church, local lords, and male relatives remain eager to assert control. A woman without a man is seen as a societal problem to be corrected. Despite the crushing weight of this existence, women form the unseen backbone of medieval society. They labor in the fields, manage households, raise children, and support entire communities. Yet their contributions are dismissed, their voices silenced, their identities erased. In medieval Europe, being a woman is a life of quiet endurance, where every breath is taken under someone else's permission, and every misstep is an excuse for punishment. You are property. You are a vessel. You are always at risk. and the world never lets you forget it. Justice in medieval Europe is not about fairness or truth. It's about maintaining order, enforcing power, and putting on a good show. The law exists not to protect the innocent, but to remind everyone who holds the whip hand. Punishments are designed to be seen, to be felt, and most importantly, to be feared. Whether you're actually guilty is often beside the point. The spectacle matters more than the verdict. If you're accused of a crime, don't expect a careful investigation. The process is crude and heavily skewed against you. Witnesses are unreliable, confessions are prized above evidence, and torture is a perfectly acceptable method of extracting truth. Whether you stole a loaf of bread or murdered your neighbor, the pathway to justice often begins and ends with pain. One of the most common forms of proof is trial by ordeal, a brutal process where divine intervention is expected to reveal guilt or innocence. You might be forced to plunge your hand into boiling water to retrieve a stone, after which your burns are inspected days later. If they heal cleanly, you're innocent. If not, guilty. Another ordeal involves carrying a red-hot iron bar for several paces. Blistered hands. Clearly, God's judgment has spoken. Then there's the infamous dunking stool or ordeal by water. You're tied up and thrown into a pond. If you float, you're deemed in league with the devil. If you sink, you're innocent. But you may well drown before anyone bothers to pull you out. Public executions are the ultimate expression of medieval justice. Hangings, beheadings, burnings at the stake. These are communal events, drawing crowds from miles around. Vendors sell food, children climb onto shoulders, and entire families treat the occasion like a fair. The condemned is paraded through the streets, jeered at, pelted with rotten vegetables and stones. Humiliation is part of the sentence. The messier the execution, the better. A skilled executioner might be praised for his clean cut. A botched beheading with repeated blows is considered prime entertainment. For lesser offenses, punishments are designed to degrade. The pillory and stocks are staples of public shaming, forcing offenders to stand immobilized while the crowd takes its liberties. Spitting, slapping, throwing filth. It's all part of the experience. A woman accused of gossip might be forced to wear the scold's bridle, a metal cage clamped over her head with a spiked plate to suppress her tongue. Thieves could face branding, mutilation, or amputation of hands. Poachers might lose an ear or be blinded, all under the approving gaze of their fellow villagers. Punishment is not just retribution, it's a warning. Fear keeps the lower classes in line far more effectively than mercy ever could. Nobles and clergy, of course, often receive gentler treatment for the same crimes. But their punishments are still public displays, meant to reassure the masses that no one is truly above the law, at least in appearance. In this grim theater of justice, your fate depends less on your actions and more on your standing, your enemies, and the mood of the day. Justice is brutal. Justice is arbitrary. And most of all, justice is a spectacle. Whether you are right or wrong matters far less than whether your suffering serves as a useful example to everyone else. In medieval Europe, violence is not just common, it is accepted, expected, and woven into the very fabric of daily life. Nowhere is this more apparent than within the home. The idea of domestic violence as a crime simply doesn't exist. The family is viewed as a microcosm of society, and within it, the man is the undisputed ruler. His authority is absolute, and his right to enforce it through physical punishment is not only tolerated but, in many cases, legally sanctioned. A husband is considered responsible for the moral and practical order of his household. This includes his wife, his children, and any servants under his roof. If a wife disobeys, speaks out of turn, or fails in her duties, it is seen as the husband's obligation to correct her. The rod, the fist, the strap, these are tools of discipline, not instruments of abuse. The law recognizes this authority explicitly. Rule of thumb, a term that persists to this day, is often linked, though somewhat mythically, to the idea that a man could legally beat his wife with a stick no thicker than his thumb. Whether this exact guideline was codified or not, the underlying principle is clear. Physical punishment is a husband's prerogative. Children fare no better. The concept of a nurturing, gentle upbringing is foreign. Children are viewed as inherently wayward, their wills needing to be broken and molded into obedience. Beatings are a standard part of education, both at home and in whatever form of rudimentary schooling might exist. Discipline is swift and severe. A disobedient child might be whipped, beaten with rods, or subjected to humiliating punishments designed to publicly reinforce the father's authority. This culture of violence is not confined behind closed doors. It spills into the streets, into the fields, into every aspect of community life. Neighbors hear the cries, see the bruises, but interference is rare. To intervene in another man's household is to challenge his authority, a serious social offense. The church occasionally preaches moderation, urging husbands not to beat their wives too severely, but the concern is less about the woman's welfare and more about preserving order and preventing scandal. For women, options are few. Divorce is nearly impossible. Annulments are granted only under extreme, narrowly defined circumstances, and fleeing an abusive husband often results in destitution, social exile, or forced return. The law does not offer protection. There are no shelters, no legal recourse, no sympathetic authorities. A woman's suffering is her burden to bear. This normalization of domestic violence extends beyond punishment. It reflects a broader societal view that strength is virtue and submission is duty. Violence is seen as a natural method of maintaining hierarchy, from the peasant's hovel to the noble's castle. Mercy is a personal choice, not an expectation. In medieval Europe, the home is not a sanctuary. It is another domain where power is asserted through force. The bruises, the scars, the quiet endurance, they are as much a part of daily life as tilling the fields or baking the bread. And society, from church to court, sees nothing wrong with it. In medieval Europe, war is not an extraordinary event. It is the background noise of daily life. Unlike the modern notion of wars as distinct, time-bound conflicts, the medieval world exists in a near-constant state of violence. Local skirmishes, feudal disputes, border raids, dynastic wars, and holy crusades churn endlessly, touching every generation without fail. War is as much a part of life as harvests and plagues. Feudal lords wage private wars with their neighbors over land, power, or personal slights. Castles are not merely grand residences. They are fortresses built with defense in mind, ever ready for sieges that can last months. Villages like yours, caught between feuding nobles, are little more than pawns in their personal vendettas. Your fields are trampled by knights, your livestock seized for provisions, your stores looted without compensation. Peasants have no say in these matters. You are expected to endure, rebuild, and pay taxes to fund the next round of bloodshed. Conscription is not formalized, but it is inescapable. When a lord calls his men to arms, every able-bodied man in his domain is expected to answer. Refusal is not an option. You arm yourself with whatever is at hand: spears, axes, or simple farming tools, turned into makeshift weapons. Training is minimal. Survival depends on luck and brute strength more than strategy. For many, the battlefield is a muddy clearing not far from home, where disputes over grazing rights or fishing streams are settled with swords rather than words. Above these local conflicts loom larger, more ambitious wars. Dynastic disputes between kings can engulf entire regions for years. Battles like Agincourt or Hastings are celebrated in bardic songs, but for the common folk, they are remembered as times of crushing levies, burnt villages, and widespread famine. Armies march across the land like swarms of locusts, stripping it bare, leaving devastation in their wake. And then there are the Crusades, grand religious campaigns that promise salvation in exchange for service. The Church, ever eager to direct the violent energies of Europe's nobility outward, calls for holy wars against infidels in distant lands. Thousands of men, driven by faith, greed, or desperation, take up the cross and march eastward. Few return. Those who do come back changed, often broken in body and mind, bringing with them not riches, but new diseases and stories of horrors that will haunt them forever. For those left behind, war still casts a long shadow. Taxes are raised to fund campaigns. Trade routes are disrupted. Famine follows as crops are destroyed or left untended. Refugees flood into already struggling villages, spreading disease and desperation. Women and children are not spared. Raiding parties see them as spoils of war. Rape, abduction, and slavery are common. The legal system offers no protection, and even the Church's condemnations are hollow when convenient alliances or noble privileges are at stake. In this world, peace is a fleeting illusion. If your own Lord is not at war, rest assured his neighbor is. If the king is not mustering an army, a distant pope is. War is constant. Its forms may change, feuds, raids, crusades, but its presence is as certain as death and taxes. For the people of medieval Europe, war is not an event. It is a way of life, one that demands your labor, your blood, and often your life, generation after generation, without end. In medieval Europe, the idea of a long life is almost laughable. You are born into a world where death is not some distant inevitability, but a daily companion, lurking in every cough, every scrape, every sip of water. Half of all children never see their 5th birthday. Disease, malnutrition, and sheer bad luck cut their lives tragically short, and the loss is so common that it rarely shocks anyone. Families might have 10 children in the desperate hope that a few will survive to adulthood. It's a cruel numbers game played against impossible odds. If you do make it past those fragile early years, the dangers only shift form. Childhood illnesses give way to the brutal demands of physical labor. From an early age, your body is pushed to its limits, hauling water, working the fields, tending livestock. Every task carries the risk of injury, and in a world without effective medical care, even the smallest wound can spell your end. A blister becomes an abscess. A cut turns septic. A broken bone can lead to infection and death. There are no antibiotics, no antiseptics, no understanding of hygiene. You either heal by sheer luck, or you don't heal at all. Illness sweeps through communities in relentless waves. Plague, dysentery, typhoid, tuberculosis, names you might not even know, but whose symptoms you fear instinctively. Fevers that never break, coughing that never stops, stomachs that never settle. The sick are tended by family, sometimes by monks or nuns, but genuine medical help is out of reach for most. Treatments are based on superstition and centuries-old misconceptions. Bloodletting, purging, and poultices of dubious origin do more harm than good. Recovery, when it happens, more a matter of endurance than remedy. Nutrition is another constant battle. Your diet consists mainly of bread, thin pottage, and whatever scraps you can grow or gather. Meat is rare. Fresh vegetables are seasonal luxuries, and hunger is a constant shadow. Malnutrition weakens your body, making you more susceptible to every disease that passes through your village. Winters are especially brutal. Food stores dwindle, illnesses spread faster, and the cold claims its annual tithe of lives. If you somehow manage to reach adulthood, your body already shows the wear. By your 30s, your teeth are rotting, your back is bent, and your joints ache with the accumulated strain of a life spent in relentless toil. To see 40 is to be considered old. Elders in their 50s or 60s exist, but they are rare, often regarded with a mix of respect and morbid fascination, as if they've somehow cheated death's natural schedule. Childbirth claims countless women in their prime, while men are lost to war, accidents, and untreated injuries. The Grim Reaper makes no distinctions. Nobles may live slightly longer, thanks to better diets and slightly cleaner living conditions, but they too fall prey to infection, violence, and disease. In this world, death is never far. It does not wait for old age. It strikes early, often, and without mercy. Every day you wake up is a small victory. Every year you survive is a statistical anomaly. Life expectancy isn't just low, it's a cruel joke, a stark reminder that in medieval Europe, the human body is fragile, and the world is relentless in its attempts to break it. In medieval Europe, death does not come with dignity. It is swift, violent, and when it arrives, there is little ceremony to soften the blow. For the vast majority of people, dying is a lonely, miserable affair. Surrounded by family members too exhausted or too terrified to help, you slip away in a dark, smoky room, your body ravaged by illness or injury, your passing met not with quiet reverence, but with practical urgency. There are no deathbeds draped in silk, no whispered farewells. There is simply the pressing need to get your body into the ground before it infects the living. For peasants, death is as common as dawn. Infant mortality, disease, famine, and accidents ensure that most families have buried as many loved ones as they've raised. Funerals, when they happen, are stark affairs. There are no caskets for the poor, just a simple shroud, if that. The body is carried out quickly, usually by family or close neighbors, and buried in the churchyard, often in a shallow grave. Markers, if they exist at all, are rudimentary wooden crosses, soon lost to weather and time. The church might offer a brief blessing, but even that is sometimes rushed, especially when death comes in waves. When plague strikes, even these sparse rituals vanish. Death comes so quickly and in such numbers that the community's entire focus shifts from mourning to disposal. Plague pits are dug outside town walls, massive communal graves where bodies are stacked layer upon layer. There's no time for prayers, no room for sentiment. The overwhelming fear of contagion demands speed. Carts rumble through the streets piled high with corpses. Bring out your dead becomes a grim refrain, a daily reminder of how quickly life can be snuffed out. Embalming is a foreign concept to most of Europe, reserved for kings and saints, and even then, poorly understood. The average person's body is left to nature. The smell of decay spreads fast, attracting rats, flies, and worse. In urban areas, where space is scarce, older graves are often exhumed to make room for the newly dead, their bones gathered into ossuaries, or simply discarded. The idea of eternal rest is more spiritual aspiration than physical reality. for those without family, or for the outcasts, criminals, heretics, lepers, death is even lonelier. Their bodies might be dumped in remote pits, left unmarked, unblessed, and forgotten. The Church teaches that a proper burial is essential for the soul's passage, but practical concerns often override spiritual ideals. When faced with overwhelming death, even the clergy can't keep up with the rituals. This grim practicality permeates every level of society. Death is not sanitized or hidden away. It is seen, smelled, and accepted as a part of daily life. There are no funeral homes, no morticians. The community handles its dead, and the work is as dirty and thankless as any other chore. Mourning is a luxury, often set aside for the more immediate concern of survival. In medieval Europe, death does not linger. It arrives swiftly, leaves devastation in its wake, and demands that life goes on without pause. There are no drawn-out ceremonies, no comfort in collective grieving. The dead are buried quickly, quietly, and often anonymously, their passing noted only by the fresh mound of earth hastily piled above them. At a glance, the life of a medieval noble seems like a dream compared to the squalor of the peasants. Grand castles, feasts, fine clothes, and a position far above the toiling masses. Surely this is where comfort begins. But the truth is, while nobles enjoy certain privileges, their lives are still a far cry from the luxury we imagine. Power and wealth offer a buffer, but not an escape from the filth, disease, and ever-present shadow of death that defines medieval existence. The castles themselves, symbols of power and prestige, are cold, damp, and utterly miserable by modern standards. Built for defense, not comfort, they are drafty stone fortresses where every room echoes with the chill. Fireplaces are few and inefficient, unable to warm the cavernous halls. Tapestries hang on the walls to slow the creeping cold, but they're poor substitutes for insulation. In winter, the inside of a castle feels little different from the outside, just with less wind. Sanitation is barely better than in the villages below. Privies, called garderobes, are simple holes in the wall leading directly to pits or, worse, straight down into the moat. The stench is omnipresent. Waste management is primitive, and servants tasked with cleaning do so with rudimentary tools and little water. Bathing is rare, even among the elite. Perfumes and scented oils are the preferred method of masking body odor, not removing it. Hygiene remains a problem nobles cannot buy their way out of. Lice and fleas are constant companions, burrowed into fur-lined cloaks and expensive woolen garments. Richer fabrics only mean more places for parasites to thrive. Medicine, for all its cost, is no better than what the poor receive. Nobles consult physicians, who rely on the same flawed humoral theories, prescribing bloodletting, purging, and bizarre concoctions that offer little real help. Infectious diseases sweep through castles with the same ruthless efficiency as they do through peasant hovels. Influenza, dysentery, smallpox, and plague do not respect social rank. Close quarters, frequent gatherings, and the habit of housing large retinues of servants mean that illness spreads quickly and widely. While the wealthy might have softer bedding or cleaner water, they remain vulnerable to the same medieval miseries. Nobles do have better food. Their tables are graced with meats, spices, fresh bread, and imported delicacies that peasants can only dream of. Yet this bounty comes with its own risks. Rich diets, heavy in meat and lacking in vegetables, led to gout, digestive troubles, and a host of other ailments. Food safety is still rudimentary, and spoiled meat or contaminated wine can just as easily fell a lord as a serf. Violence is a constant companion for the nobility. Power struggles, inheritance disputes, and political machinations often end in bloodshed. Duels, assassinations, and battlefield deaths are common. Nobles may wear armor, but it does not shield them from the daggers of rivals or the whims of an ambitious king. A misstep at court can be as deadly as a wound on the field. Even in matters of childbirth and child-rearing, noble women face the same lethal risks as their peasant counterparts. No amount of wealth can prevent the dangers of medieval medicine during labor, and child mortality remains heartbreakingly high, even in the grandest halls. In the end, nobles live better, yes, but not by much. They eat more, dress finer, and die with more ceremony. But they still live in a world where filth, disease, and violence are inescapable. Their castles may rise above the villages, but their suffering remains firmly grounded in the same harsh medieval reality. To the outside world, a medieval castle is the ultimate symbol of power, wealth, and security. Towering stone walls, imposing gates, soaring battlements. It's easy to imagine these as luxurious palaces where nobles live in splendor. But step inside, and the illusion crumbles quickly. These fortresses are built for defense, not comfort. They are cold, cramped, noisy, and riddled with the same miseries that plague every other corner of medieval life, just dressed in fancier trappings. The walls are thick stone, designed to repel invaders, not to keep out the weather. In winter, the cold seeps in mercilessly. In summer, the air turns stifling and stagnant. Drafts snake through every crack. Fires burn constantly, but even roaring hearths barely warm the vast halls and chambers. You can sit inches from a blazing fire and still feel the bite of winter in your bones. Smoke from these fires lingers in the air, blackening the ceilings and settling in your lungs. There's no such thing as privacy. The lord and lady might have their own chamber, but even that is shared with servants, guards, and sometimes favored guests. Curtains or wooden partitions offer the illusion of separation, but sound travels freely. The rest of the household, family members, knights, squires, ladies-in-waiting, servants, live communally. The great hall doubles as dining room, court, sleeping quarters for retainers, and general gathering space. The noise is constant, footsteps echoing on stone, the clatter of pots, the low hum of gossip. Sanitation is, predictably, abysmal. The guardrobes, essentially vertical shafts with holes over them, serve as toilets, but they're rudimentary at best. Waste often drops into cesspits or moats, turning these supposed defensive features into foul, disease-breeding swamps. Cleaning is minimal. Chamber pots are emptied into nearby courtyards or over castle walls. The stench is a part of daily life, so familiar it barely registers. Water is drawn from wells or cisterns, but keeping it clean is a losing battle. Bathing remains infrequent, done in small wooden tubs in drafty rooms. Soap is a luxury, used sparingly, and lice, fleas, and other pests thrive in the fur-lined cloaks and heavy woolens worn by castle inhabitants. Velvet, silk, and brocade might look impressive, but beneath them, the realities of medieval hygiene remain unchanged. Beyond the physical discomfort, castles are hothouses of political intrigue. Every smile hides a calculation. Every conversation is laced with subtext. Alliances shift with the wind, and betrayal is a constant threat. For nobles, life in a castle means navigating a minefield of rivalries, schemes, and delicate social maneuvering. A misplaced word can spark a feud. A poorly judged alliance can lead to ruin. Paranoia is not an affliction here. It's survival instinct. Servants, though low in status, are ever present, listening, watching, gossiping. Secrets are currency, and few things remain hidden for long. The social hierarchy is rigid and suffocating. Every movement, every gesture, every interaction is governed by layers of etiquette and expectation. Despite its imposing facade, the castle is not a sanctuary. It's a stone cage, impressive from the outside, oppressive within. Comfort is an illusion, maintained by ceremony and status. But underneath it all, the reality is harsh, uncomfortable, and endlessly political. Life in a castle might spare you from the backbreaking labor of the fields, but it traps you in a different kind of misery, one built from stone, smoke, and suspicion. In medieval Europe, if you are born a serf, you will die a serf. There's no rising through the ranks, no dreams of a better life, no pulling yourself up by your bootstraps, because you don't own boots, and you certainly don't own your freedom. Serfdom is not slavery in name, but in practice, it's painfully close. You are tied to the land as firmly as any ox pulling a plow, not by chains of iron, but by the invisible but unbreakable bonds of feudal law. You don't own the fields you till. You don't own the house you live in. You don't even own yourself. The land belongs to the lord of the manor, and by extension, so do you. Your labor, your time, your very existence is his to command. When the harvest comes, a large share of your crops goes directly into his granary. When taxes are due, you pay. When his soldiers need provisioning, your livestock is seized. The scraps that remain are what you survive on. Barely. Legally, you are not considered a slave, but the practical difference is laughable. You cannot leave the land without your lord's permission. If you try to flee, you risk brutal punishment and forced return. In some cases, your very body is accounted for in manorial records, like livestock. If the land is sold, you go with it as part of the property. You are, in every meaningful sense, part of the estate inventory. Even your family life is not your own. Marriage among serfs often requires the lord's approval. Sometimes, a fine must be paid for the privilege of marrying someone from another manor. Your children inherit your status automatically, born into the same legal and social servitude that traps you. The cycle is self-perpetuating, generation after generation, bound to the same patch of soil. Attempts to rise above your station are nearly impossible. Education is out of reach. Trade is restricted. The church offers a narrow path of escape, perhaps a life as a monk or nun, but those opportunities are limited and heavily dependent on the whims of local power. For the vast majority, social mobility is a fantasy. The legal codes reinforce your place. There are laws dictating what you can wear, where you can go, what tools you can use, even what you can eat. You are expected to work not just your own plot of land, but also the Lord's domain fields without pay. Free time is an alien concept. Any leisure you enjoy is stolen from hours that should be spent in service to the estate. Your labor is the backbone of the medieval economy, yet your life is considered expendable. If war comes, you're levied into service. If famine strikes, you are the first to starve. Your suffering is so normalized that it barely registers in the grand chronicles of history. In medieval Europe, serfdom is a slow death sentence disguised as tradition. You live to serve. You serve because you have no choice, and you die having moved not an inch from where you began. Freedom is a word you'll hear spoken by nobles and priests, but for you, it remains a story told from behind a plow. In medieval Europe, entertainment is not a gentle distraction from life's hardships. It is brutal, bloody, and often fatal, for both man and beast. Leisure, such as it exists, is steeped in violence. The line between sport and slaughter is razor thin, and few people seem to mind when it's crossed. For a population accustomed to hardship, suffering, and death, bloodshed isn't shocking. It's a form of recreation. One of the most popular pastimes is bear baiting. A bear, often chained to a post, is set upon by packs of dogs. Spectators gather in droves to watch as the dogs attack, biting and tearing, while the bear defends itself with savage swipes of its claws. The spectacle is loud, chaotic, and gruesome. Bets are placed on how long the bear will last, how many dogs will die, and whether the spectacle will end in the bear's triumph or its slow, agonizing death. It's not unusual for the crowd to cheer louder for the bloodiest moments. The suffering of the animals is considered part of the show. Public executions serve a dual purpose: punishment and entertainment. Hangings, beheadings, burnings at the stake. These events draw huge crowds. Execution days are treated like public holidays. Vendors sell food, children sit atop their fathers' shoulders for a better view, and the town square buzzes with excitement. The condemned is paraded through the streets, jeered at, pelted with filth. Their death is not a solemn occasion. It is a communal spectacle, a performance meant to satisfy the public's appetite for justice and gore alike. A clean execution might earn a disappointed groan from the crowd. A botched beheading, requiring multiple strokes of the axe, is considered a highlight. Tournaments, ostensibly noble and chivalrous events, are no less violent. Knights clash in jousts, their lances shattering against armor, bodies flung from saddles in bone-breaking falls. Mock battles, or melees, are even more brutal. Dozens of armed men fight in a chaotic brawl, where injuries and deaths are common. Though intended as demonstrations of martial skill, tournaments are bloodbaths in their own right, often ending in broken limbs, crushed ribs, and the occasional fatal blow. For the spectators, this is the main attraction. Even simpler village games are laced with violence. Wrestling matches, quarterstaff duels, and other contests of strength are fought with a ferocity that often results in injury. There are no referees, no protective gear. The crowd's cheers rise with every bloodied nose, every split lip. Mock executions, such as ducking, scolds, and suspected witches in rivers, blur the line between punishment and sport. Participants may survive, but the entertainment comes from their suffering, their gasping, spluttering attempts to escape drowning. For medieval society, these events offer more than just amusement. They reinforce social order, display the power of the authorities, and provide a communal outlet for aggression. Life is harsh and short. Watching others bleed, suffer, or die offers a twisted kind of relief, a reminder that, for now, it's someone else's turn. In this world, entertainment is not an escape from brutality. It is an extension of it. Blood, pain, and death are not hidden from view. They are center stage, performed for an eager audience that sees in them not horror, but sport. In medieval Europe, crime is rarely about greed or malice. It's about survival. For the vast majority, daily life teeters on the edge of starvation. And when the harvest fails or taxes rise, desperation drives people to acts they'd otherwise avoid. Petty theft, poaching, begging. These are not grand schemes of villainy, but small, desperate rebellions against a world that offers no mercy. Crime, in this context, is less a choice and more a last resort. Stealing a loaf of bread, a chicken from a neighbor's coop, or a few apples from an orchard can be the difference between eating and going hungry. Yet even these minor offenses are met with harsh punishments. Medieval justice cares little for motives. A thief is a thief, whether he stole a gold goblet or a handful of grain. First-time offenders might be publicly flogged or placed in the stocks, where the community is encouraged to heap humiliation upon them. Repeat offenses can lead to mutilation, hands lopped off, ears cropped, noses slit, or even execution. Poaching, especially, is a deadly gamble. Forests are often the property of the local lord, and the animals within are considered his exclusive domain. Catching a rabbit or a deer to feed your starving family is technically theft against the nobility. The penalties are severe. Caught poachers might face blinding, branding, or death by hanging. Still, many take the risk. Hunger is a more immediate threat than the distant possibility of capture. Begging is the option left to those who have nothing. The lame, the sick, widows, and orphans are most often seen crouched outside churches, hands outstretched, pleading for alms. The church preaches charity, but communities are quick to turn cold when resources are scarce. Beggars are tolerated up to a point. If their numbers swell or if they become too persistent, they're labeled as vagrants, rounded up, beaten, and driven from town. Organized crime, in the way we think of it today, is rare among the lower classes. Most criminals are simply people caught breaking laws designed to protect the wealthy and maintain social order. Even gleaning, collecting leftover crops from harvested fields, can be considered theft if done without permission. For peasants, survival itself becomes a crime. The nobility, of course, are often guilty of far grander acts of theft and violence through war, excessive taxation, and exploitation. But their actions are framed as governance, not crime. The law serves their interests, not those of the poor. Despite the risks, the alternative to these crimes is often worse. Starvation, disease, and exposure are constant threats. In a society with no social safety nets, taking what you need becomes not just a temptation, but a necessity. Crime, in this sense, becomes an act of defiance against a system designed to keep you desperate. In medieval Europe, crime is rarely born from malice. It is born from empty bellies, brutal winters, and the cold indifference of those in power. Every stolen loaf, every snared rabbit, every coin begged for, is a small act of survival in a world that punishes the poor simply for existing. The price of desperation is high, but for many, it's the only option left. In medieval Europe, medicine is less a science and more a haphazard mix of superstition, guesswork, and centuries-old folklore. With no real understanding of disease or the human body, people turn to the only explanations they can grasp: the stars, the spirits, and the ancient remedies whispered from one generation to the next. When sickness strikes, you are as likely to consult an astrologer as a physician, and a charm around your neck might offer more comfort than a dose of any medieval potion. Astrology is not a fringe belief. It is a central part of medical practice. The positions of the stars and planets are thought to influence every aspect of your health. Physicians consult elaborate star charts before prescribing treatment, believing that celestial alignments govern the body's balance of humors. If Mars is in ascension, expect fevers and bleeding disorders. A bad placement of Saturn? Prepare for melancholia, perhaps even madness. The zodiac dictates everything from when to apply a leech to when it's safe to attempt surgery, though safe is a relative term. Charms and talismans are common, their power rooted in superstition rather than evidence. A piece of iron hung around a child's neck is believed to ward off evil spirits. Amulets filled with herbs, bones, or even animal teeth are carried to protect against illness. The cross is, of course, ever present, but so are pagan symbols and obscure sigils. Superstition bleeds into every aspect of healing, filling the void where science has yet to tread. Folk remedies vary from the oddly practical to the outright bizarre. Honey and vinegar might be used to clean wounds, one of the few practices with any actual merit. But it's just as likely you'll be prescribed a poultice made from boiled earthworms or a plaster of crushed snails. Cures for fevers might involve tying a toad around your neck or placing a live chicken against an infected wound, under the belief that the animal will draw out the sickness. Some recommend burying the afflicted person up to the neck in manure, hoping the heat and cleansing power of filth will sweat out the illness. Herbalism is widely practiced, though the knowledge is often muddled by superstition. Plants like yarrow, sage, and elderflower are used in teas and salves, but their effectiveness is more often attributed to magical properties than medicinal ones. The distinction between healer and witch is perilously thin. A wise woman's remedies might save a life, or, if the village turns against her, be branded as sorcery. Leeches are used liberally, based on the belief that illness stems from an imbalance of humors. Bloodletting becomes a cure-all, whether you suffer from headaches, infections, or even depression. The more progressive doctors might suggest balancing your diet of hot and cold foods, or advise a pilgrimage to a distant shrine, as if miles of trudging through mud could cure the rot in your lungs. Religious intervention is another staple of medieval medicine. Priests offer prayers, blessings, and relics as treatments. The bones of saints are believed to hold miraculous healing powers. If your illness persists, it may be interpreted as divine punishment for sin, in which case, confession and penance are the only cures available. In medieval Europe, medicine is not a path to wellness, but a desperate dance with the unknown. With no microscopes, no understanding of infection, and no real cures, people rely on the stars, the earth, and centuries of superstition to guide them through sickness. In this world, hope itself is a kind of medicine, even if it doesn't heal. In medieval Europe, the idea of personal space simply doesn't exist. Life is lived shoulder to shoulder, breath to breath, in cramped homes where privacy is an alien concept. For the average peasant, a family's entire existence unfolds within a single room: birth, life, sickness, death, all beneath the same sagging roof, shared with not just parents and siblings, but often with extended relatives and the occasional farm animal. Space is a luxury reserved for the dead in the churchyard, not for the living. Beds, when they exist, are communal. You don't have your own mattress, or even a personal corner. Families pile together for warmth, tangled under coarse wool blankets, their bodies pressed close in the struggle against cold and damp. Lice, fleas, and the sharp elbows of your relatives are nightly companions. The concept of sleeping alone is laughable, a story told of nobles in their high towers. For most, solitude is not something you experience unless you are very rich or very dead. Your home's walls do little to separate you from your neighbors. Thin timber planks and wattle and daub construction provide little in the way of soundproofing. Every cough, every argument, every whispered secret seeps through to the next house. You know your neighbors. Business as intimately as your own, not by choice, but because there's no avoiding it. And of course, they know yours. In this suffocating proximity, gossip is not just a pastime. It is the village's social currency. Stories spread faster than the plague. A poorly timed glance, a lingering absence, a whispered argument. All are enough to spark rumors that will grow, mutate, and outlive the truth. Reputation is fragile and fiercely guarded, but also easily shattered by the relentless churn of communal judgment. There are no closed doors. Work, rest, meals, and family disputes all happen in plain view. Modesty is a practical challenge. Changing clothes happens behind a curtain, if you're lucky, but more often, it's done quickly, turned away from the least curious pair of eyes. Bathing, rare as it is, becomes a public spectacle, whether it happens in a shared tub or at the riverbank. For women, the scrutiny is even harsher. Every action is watched, weighed, and judged. A woman who laughs too loudly, who walks unchaperoned, or who lingers too long at a neighbor's door risks becoming the center of malicious rumors. Accusations of impropriety can ruin a reputation and, in the worst cases, lead to devastating consequences. Community, for all its suffocating closeness, also serves as a lifeline. When times are hard, neighbors band together, sharing resources, labor, and what little knowledge they have. But this solidarity comes at the cost of constant observation. You are never alone, never unwatched, never free from the silent, and not so silent, judgments of those around you. In medieval Europe, life is communal not by choice, but by necessity. Overcrowding, shared living, and the ever-present ears of your neighbors ensure that your life is an open book, whether you like it or not. Privacy is a privilege you will never know. Your story is everyone's story, and everyone has an opinion on how you should be living it. In medieval Europe, marriage has nothing to do with love. It is a transaction, a strategic alliance, a transfer of property and power. For most people, particularly women, it is a decision made for them, not by them. Your feelings are irrelevant. Your future is negotiated over ale between fathers, lords, and guardians, sealed with handshakes, dowries, and, sometimes, a casual exchange of livestock. Among peasants, marriage is about survival. Families arrange unions to combine land, secure labor, and ensure continuity of their meager holdings. A son might marry the daughter of a neighboring farmer to merge small plots of land, increasing their ability to feed both families. The bride's dowry, often a cow, a few chickens, or a modest sum of coin, sweetens the deal. Love matches are rare, a luxury for the few who can afford such indulgence. For the nobility, the stakes are higher, but the principles remain the same. Marriages are political tools. A noble daughter is a bargaining chip used to forge alliances, settle disputes, or strengthen claims to land and titles. The richer and more powerful the family, the younger these marriages are arranged. Betrothals are made when children are barely out of the cradle. It's not unusual for girls of 12 or 13 to be married off to men twice or even 3 times their age, their youth considered advantageous for childbearing. Consent as a legal concept exists in theory, but in practice, it's often a formality. A priest might ask if you consent to the marriage, but the pressure to comply is overwhelming. Refusal would bring disgrace to your family, invite scandal, and potentially ruin the fragile economic or social agreements at stake. The ceremony itself is simple but binding. Vows are exchanged, often in the presence of the church, but what matters most is the physical consummation. A marriage isn't considered fully valid until the couple has lain together. In some cases, witnesses are even present to ensure this happens, a crude but telling reflection of how marriage is viewed, less a personal bond, more a legal contract of possession. Women, once married, lose what little legal autonomy they might have had. Their property becomes their husband's. Their bodies, too, are considered his right. A wife's primary role is to produce heirs and manage the household. Her value is tied to her fertility and obedience. Should she fail to bear children, especially sons, blame falls squarely on her shoulders, regardless of reality. Escape from an unhappy marriage is nearly impossible. Divorce is rare, granted only by the church under extreme circumstances, typically for reasons of consanguinity or impotence, not abuse or incompatibility. Widows might regain a measure of freedom, but even then, family members often pressure them into remarriage to secure continued alliances or economic security. For men, marriage also carries obligations, but with far more autonomy. A nobleman might arrange his own alliances or even take mistresses without serious social repercussion. Women, however, face ruin for even the whisper of infidelity. In medieval Europe, marriage is not a union of hearts. It is a merger of resources, a tactical arrangement designed to benefit families, lords, and kingdoms. Love, if it appears at all, is a fortunate accident, an afterthought to a contract that, for most, is simply another duty in a life defined by duty. In medieval Europe, time is not measured in minutes or schedules. It is measured by the church. Every aspect of the calendar, from the grandest festivals to the smallest village chores, revolves around religious observances. The church doesn't just tell you how to pray. It tells you how to live, when to work, when to rest, when to feast, and when to fast. Time itself belongs to God, and the church is its keeper. The year is divided not by secular months, but by a relentless procession of saints' days, holy feasts, and periods of penitence. Saints' days punctuate the calendar, often commemorating long-forgotten martyrs whose stories blur together in a haze of suffering and miracles. These are not optional holidays. Attendance at Mass is expected. And failing to honor these days properly could mark you as impious, inviting suspicion and gossip. Major religious seasons like Lent and Advent structure long stretches of your year. Lent, in particular, imposes 40 days of fasting, where meat, dairy, and even eggs are forbidden. For the poor, already living on the edge of starvation, these restrictions are less a sacrifice and more a formalization of their daily struggle. Yet the church enforces them with the same severity across all classes. To eat meat during Lent is not just a personal failing, it is a sin that demands confession and penance. Feast days, though theoretically celebratory, are also deeply structured by religious obligation. Easter, Christmas, Pentecost. These are times of both joy and rigorous observance. They offer brief respite from labor, but in exchange, you are expected to participate in processions, masses, and public acts of piety. The church ensures that even your celebrations serve to reinforce its authority. Every week is shaped by the rhythm of the church. Sunday is the Lord's Day, a day of rest, at least in theory. In practice, it means mandatory attendance at Mass, followed by public acts of charity or community labor, if decreed by the local priest. The bells of the church mark the hours, not for scheduling appointments, but for calling the faithful to prayer. The daily cycle of canonical hours, matins, lauds, prime, terce, sext, none, vespers, and compline, dictates when you rise, when you pause, when you work, and when you sleep. The agricultural calendar itself bends to religious festivals. Planting and harvesting are often timed to coincide with saints' days believed to favor fertility and abundance. Superstitions about the best days to slaughter animals, gather herbs, or even marry are all rooted in the ecclesiastical calendar. Even personal milestones are marked by the church's timeline. Births, marriages, deaths, all require the church's blessing. A child's baptism, a couple's wedding mass, the funeral rites for the dead. These sacraments not only sanctify life's key moments, but also further entwine you with the church's grip on time. For most people, especially peasants, the church's calendar is a comforting, if rigid, structure. It provides rhythm in a chaotic world, a way to mark the passage of time in a life otherwise defined by unending labor. But it is also an instrument of control. By dictating when you work, when you rest, when you fast, and when you feast, the church ensures its authority permeates every moment of your existence. In medieval Europe, time is not your own. It is a gift from God, meted out by the church, measured in prayers, feasts, and fasts. Your days, your weeks, your entire year, all of it is tethered to the relentless march of religious obligation. In medieval Europe, official channels rarely meet the needs of the common folk. Laws are written by lords, enforced by stewards, and designed to protect the interests of those in power. But survival rarely follows the rules. Beneath the surface of this rigid society thrives a black market, a shadowy economy where peasants, tradesmen, and even minor nobles bend and break the law simply to get by. Illegal brewing is one of the most widespread forms of black market activity. Beer and ale are staple drinks, safer than water and vital for daily life. But brewing is heavily regulated, with lords and guilds imposing strict controls and taxes. For many households, brewing their own ale without paying dues or adhering to quotas is a quiet act of rebellion and necessity. Known as hedge brewing, this underground practice is common in villages where licensed ale is too expensive or too scarce. Discovery can result in fines, confiscation of equipment, or worse. But the risk is taken because the alternative is thirst, illness, or economic ruin. Black market meat is another vital, if dangerous, commodity. Poaching is illegal, considered theft from the Lord's land, but the woods and forests provide what the manor does not. Rabbits, deer, wild birds, all are fair game for those willing to risk the gallows. Butchers who traffic in this illicit meat do so discreetly, often under the cover of legitimate trade. For the poor, these black market sources are sometimes the only way to obtain vital protein. The penalties are severe: branding, mutilation, even execution for repeat offenders. Yet hunger pushes many to take the chance. Beyond food and drink, underground trading flourishes in countless forms. Unlicensed wool spinning, illicit salt trade, stolen tools, all circulate quietly in village markets and hidden alleys. Sumptuary laws, which dictate who can wear certain fabrics or colors, create a demand for forbidden goods among the ambitious lower classes. Smugglers bring in foreign spices, rare fabrics, and contraband items, skirting tolls and taxes at great personal risk. Even religious artifacts are not immune to the black market's pull. Relics of dubious authenticity, splinters of the true cross, bones of long-forgotten saints, vials of holy water, are bought and sold by opportunists preying on the pious. Pilgrims eager for spiritual protection or seeking a miracle cure often purchase these items, despite church warnings against such practices. The black market also provides a space for alternative medicine. Herbalists and wise women sell remedies not sanctioned by church or guild, offering treatments rooted in folk knowledge. Their work exists in a legal gray area, tolerated when useful, persecuted when feared. Despite harsh penalties, the black market is essential. It represents the only viable path for many to supplement their meager incomes, access basic necessities, or bypass unjust restrictions. For every official decree, there is a quiet workaround. For every tax, a method of evasion. In medieval Europe, survival often depends on knowing which laws to break and how to do it without getting caught. The black market is not a den of villainy. but a parallel economy of necessity, born from a system that leaves too many with too little. It is a constant, unseen heartbeat beneath the rigid facade of feudal order, a testament to human resilience in a world designed to keep you desperate. In medieval Europe, the simple act of traveling from one village to the next is an undertaking fraught with peril. Roads, if they can even be called that, are little more than rutted tracts of dirt, churned to mud in the rain and hardened into bone-jarring ridges in the dry. Infrastructure is rudimentary at best. Bridges are rare, waymarkers unreliable, and maps are luxuries few can afford. The farther you stray from familiar ground, the more the world becomes a hostile, unpredictable place. For the average peasant, travel is something done only when absolutely necessary. Markets, fairs, pilgrimages, these are events that pull people onto the road, but each step away from home increases the risk. The greatest threat isn't the treacherous paths or impassable fords, it's other people. Bandits, outlaws, and highwaymen prowl the countryside, preying on travelers with impunity. These are not romanticized rogues, but desperate, often violent men with little to lose. A lone traveler is easy pickings. Even small groups can find themselves ambushed, their goods stolen, their lives taken without a second thought. The forests and wilderness are no safer. Wolves, once common across Europe, travel in packs, and while they might not normally seek out humans, hunger drives them to desperation. Bears, wild boars, and even large feral dogs pose serious threats to those forced to navigate these untamed spaces. Nightfall brings a new layer of danger. Without lanterns or torches, the world becomes pitch black, and travelers are left vulnerable, unable to see what might be stalking them from the shadows. Shelter is another issue. Inns are rare outside of major towns, and those that exist are often little more than glorified barns, offering a roof and straw bedding, but little security. For many, the safest option is to seek refuge in a monastery or the house of a sympathetic villager, provided they're willing to take the risk of harboring strangers. Otherwise, you sleep outdoors, huddled against the cold, with only your wits and luck to protect you. Tolls and tariffs add yet another layer of hardship. Lords, abbeys, and local authorities impose fees on travelers using their roads or crossing their bridges. For the poor, these tolls can be ruinous, forcing many to take longer, more dangerous routes through the wilderness to avoid payment. Enforcement is often arbitrary, with toll keepers demanding bribes or seizing goods from those unable to pay. Travel is also slowed by the sheer unpredictability of nature. Flooded rivers, landslides, and impassable bogs can halt a journey for days, even weeks. There are no maintenance crews to clear the way. You wait, or you find a risky, often more dangerous alternative path. Even those of higher status travel at their peril. Nobles might have armed escorts, but they are not immune to ambushes or treacherous conditions. A broken wheel, a lamed horse, or a collapsing bridge can turn a routine trip into a disaster. Despite these dangers, travel remains a necessity. Trade, pilgrimages, royal summons, all demand movement across this perilous landscape. But every journey, no matter how short, is a gamble. In medieval Europe, the road does not promise adventure or opportunity. It promises risk. Each mile is a contest between your determination and the world's indifference to your survival. To travel is to tempt fate, and fate, more often than not, does not favor the traveler. For those trapped in the grinding poverty of rural medieval life, towns might seem like a beacon of opportunity, a place where trades flourish, markets bustle, and fortunes can, in theory, be made. But the reality is far grimmer. Towns in medieval Europe are not havens of prosperity. They are overcrowded, unsanitary, disease-ridden pits where people live crammed together in conditions barely distinguishable from the filth outside their walls. Life in a town does not lift you from hardship. It simply concentrates your suffering in a smaller, filthier space. Streets are narrow, winding channels of mud, waste, and refuse. Paved roads are a luxury found only in the largest cities, and even then, they're often buried under layers of human and animal filth. Horses, oxen, pigs, and chickens share these streets with merchants, beggars, and townsfolk. There are no organized waste disposal systems. Chamber pots are emptied directly onto the street, the contents splashing down into open gutters that snake through the town, carrying the reeking sludge sluggishly away. Or not at all. After a rain, these streets become rivers of excrement and garbage. Houses are packed tightly together, their upper stories jutting out over the streets, almost touching across the narrow alleys. Light barely penetrates the maze of timber and stone. Most homes are 1 or 2 rooms, shared by entire families, apprentices, and sometimes even livestock. Privacy is non-existent. Ventilation is poor. Smoke from countless hearths chokes the air, mingling with the stench of tanning pits, butcher shops, and human waste. Water sources, like wells and public fountains, are few and often contaminated. Streams and rivers that run through towns double as sewers, their once clear waters turned into sluggish, disease-bearing cesspools. Clean water is a constant concern, and outbreaks of waterborne diseases like dysentery and typhoid are a grim part of everyday life. The crowded conditions make towns perfect breeding grounds for disease. Plague outbreaks sweep through with horrifying regularity, decimating populations in weeks. But even in the absence of such dramatic calamities, illnesses like smallpox, tuberculosis, and leprosy thrive in the perpetual squalor. Rats and fleas are everywhere, unnoticed until their presence becomes deadly. Fire is a constant threat. With buildings crammed together, made of wood and heated by open flames, a single spark can reduce entire districts to ash. There is no organized firefighting service. A major blaze can, and often does, destroy large portions of a town before it burns itself out. Work in the towns is no less grueling than in the countryside. Guilds control trade and labor, but competition is fierce and corruption rampant. Apprenticeships are long and poorly paid. Wages are low, hours are brutal, and the risk of injury is high. For many, the promise of a better life in town proves hollow. Even the dead contribute to the misery. Churchyards are small, quickly filling with bodies. Graves are shallow, often reused, and the scent of decay lingers. In times of plague or famine, mass graves are hastily dug and covered over, but never far from the living. Despite all this, people continue to flock to towns. The faint hope of economic opportunity, the presence of markets, and the illusion of freedom draw them in. Yet once there, they find themselves trading one form of hardship for another, swapping the backbreaking toil of rural life for the suffocating filth and disease of urban squalor. In medieval Europe, towns are not sanctuaries. They are filthy death traps, where the density of humanity magnifies every misery and turns survival into an even greater challenge. You may escape the Lord's fields, but you'll find no mercy in the town's choking, pestilent streets. In medieval Europe, legacy isn't about pride or vanity. It's about survival in the face of inevitable oblivion. Life is brutally short, unpredictable, and unforgiving. Death comes early, often without warning, and for most people, the only chance of leaving any mark on the world is through what they pass on: their land, their name, their bloodline. Legacy is not a luxury. It is the only form of immortality the average person can hope for. For peasants, land is life. Even a tiny strip of earth, barely enough to feed a family, becomes a precious inheritance. The struggle to keep it within the family defines generations. To lose your land is to lose your future, your standing, your very identity. Families cling to their small plots with desperate tenacity, paying crushing taxes, laboring from dawn till dusk, enduring famine and plague, all to ensure that the land stays in their hands and passes to their children. Names carry weight too, though not in the noble sense of banners and crests. Among common folk, a family name is a fragile thread of continuity. Oral histories preserve stories of ancestors who survived harsh winters, outwitted tax collectors, or built homes from scratch. These tales become as vital as the land itself, giving meaning to lives otherwise lost in the grind of daily survival. To be forgotten is the ultimate failure. To be remembered, even in the simplest of stories, is a small victory against the oblivion that swallows so many. For the nobility, legacy takes on an even grander, yet equally desperate, dimension. Entire dynasties hinge on the production of heirs. Lineages are meticulously recorded, family trees obsessively maintained, not for sentiment, but for power. Marriages are arranged not for love, but to merge estates, secure alliances, and preserve bloodlines. A noble without an heir faces not just personal sorrow, but the potential erasure of their family's influence, their holdings, and their place in history. The church, too, capitalizes on this fear of oblivion. Donations of land, money, and goods are often made in the hopes of securing a place in heaven and ensuring that prayers will be said for the soul after death. Wealthy patrons commission chapels, tombs, and stained glass windows, bearing their likenesses, desperate to carve their names into stone and into collective memory. Even the illiterate find ways to etch themselves into history. Carvings in church pews, marks on boundary stones, names scratched into walls, small acts of defiance against the anonymity of death. Legacy in this context is survival beyond the grave, a refusal to be forgotten. Children are seen not just as beloved offspring, but as vessels of continuation. Large families are common, not just for help in the fields, but as insurance against the brutal child mortality rates. Each surviving son or daughter is a potential lifeline for the family's name and livelihood. In a world where life expectancy is pitiful, and every cough, cut, or crop failure could spell the end, the obsession with legacy becomes a deeply human response. To be remembered is to matter. To have your name spoken by future generations is to defeat death in some small, stubborn way. In medieval Europe, legacy is not a matter of pride. It is the only defense against the erasure of your existence, a last, defiant stand against a world eager to forget you ever lived. In medieval Europe, heresy is not a theological debate. It is a death sentence. To question the Church's authority, to voice an opinion that strays from official doctrine, is to paint a target on your back. Intellectual freedom, as we understand it today, is non-existent. Belief is not a private matter. It is a rigid framework imposed upon you, and stepping outside of it is seen not only as rebellion against the Church, but as rebellion against the very fabric of society. The Church is more than a spiritual guide. It is the ultimate authority on law, morality, science, and truth. To challenge its teachings is to challenge the structure of medieval life itself. Disagreement is not tolerated. Doubt is not entertained. Even sincere, well-meaning questions are viewed with suspicion. The road from curiosity to condemnation is short and merciless. If you are accused of heresy, the process is swift and brutal. The Inquisition, an institution designed explicitly to root out heresy, operates with near absolute power. Trials are conducted in secret. Evidence is often circumstantial or based on rumor. Confessions, extracted under torture, are considered the gold standard of proof. Whether you actually believe what you're accused of is irrelevant. The accusation alone is enough to destroy your life. Punishments are designed to be as public and terrifying as possible. Burning at the stake is the most infamous penalty, a fiery spectacle meant to cleanse the soul and deter others. Lesser punishments include flogging, excommunication, which effectively exiles you from both religious and social life, and lifelong imprisonment in appalling conditions. Your property is seized. Your family is disgraced. Even after death, your remains can be exhumed and desecrated as posthumous punishment. The range of what counts as heresy is alarmingly broad. Disputing the Pope's authority, interpreting the Bible independently, criticizing church corruption, or even practicing unapproved religious rituals can land you in mortal danger. Popular movements that call for reform, like the Cathars, Waldensians, or later, the Lollards, are hunted relentlessly. Their followers are burned, their teachings erased where possible, and their names condemned to infamy. Science and philosophy are similarly constrained. Ideas that contradict church teachings, such as certain astronomical theories or medical practices, are suppressed. Scholars must walk a careful line, couching their findings in religious language to avoid the suspicion of heresy. Intellectual exploration is not encouraged. Obedience and conformity are. Even silence can be dangerous. To fail to denounce a known heretic might implicate you. Communities are pressured to police their own, fostering an atmosphere of paranoia and fear. Friends, neighbors, even family members can turn on each other under the weight of suspicion. For the Church, suppressing heresy is not just about protecting doctrine, it's about preserving control. In a society where literacy is rare and information flows through a narrow, clerically controlled channel, controlling belief means controlling reality itself. In medieval Europe, to think differently is to risk everything. Heresy is not merely a spiritual crime. It is a political and social death sentence. Dissent is crushed not just to protect faith, but to maintain the delicate, oppressive order of a world where questioning the wrong thing can get you killed. In medieval Europe, leisure is not a right. It is a rare, fragile luxury, enjoyed fleetingly and usually accompanied by guilt or obligation. For most people, life is an unbroken chain of labor, tilling fields, tending livestock, repairing tools, raising children, gathering firewood, fetching water. There are no weekends, no holidays as we know them. Every day is ruled by necessity, and even moments of rest are stolen, not granted. The Church dictates when people may pause their toil, but even religious festivals, so-called days of rest, are anything but restful. Holy days might free you from fieldwork, but they demand attendance at lengthy church services, participation in processions, and other community rituals. The physical labor shifts from farming to public displays of piety. Preparing for these events involves cleaning the village, decorating the church, and contributing food or goods you can scarcely spare. For many, a festival is simply a different kind of work, just performed in slightly better clothes. Idleness is not just frowned upon, it's considered a moral failing. The Church warns constantly against sloth, labeling it one of the 7 deadly sins. To be idle is to invite temptation, to risk falling into sin, to betray the work ethic expected of the faithful. Lords and landowners echo this sentiment, seeing idleness among peasants as a threat to productivity and order. Even children are put to work as soon as they can lift a bucket or scare off crows from the crops. For women, leisure is a foreign concept entirely. Any pause in physical labor outside is filled with domestic work, spinning wool, weaving, baking, caring for children, mending clothes. Their hands are never still. The hearth is as demanding as the plow, and the expectation to maintain both is relentless. Entertainment, when it does occur, is often communal and physically taxing. Village dances, rough and tumble sports, and tournaments are not passive amusements. They require energy, participation, and frequently end in injury. Even the simple act of storytelling around the hearth happens in the rare moments when hands are still busy, knitting, carving, mending tools. For the nobility, leisure exists, but it is still framed as purposeful. Hunting, falconry, and jousting are considered noble pursuits, training exercises for war, not idle pastimes. Even their relaxation serves a social or political function, reinforcing status, forging alliances, or displaying power. Rest is rarely voluntary. Illness or injury might force someone to stop working, but even then, it's seen as an unfortunate deviation from duty. There is no concept of personal time, no space for hobbies or quiet reflection, unless you are part of the clergy or wealthy elite. Leisure, when granted, is a communal affair, tied to the rhythms of the church and the needs of the Lord, never an individual choice. In medieval Europe, to rest without purpose is to waste time, and time, in a life as short and uncertain as theirs, is never truly yours. Leisure is not celebrated. It is viewed with suspicion, a fleeting indulgence, tolerated only when sanctioned by religious or feudal authority. For the average person, life is work, and work is life. Anything else is a rare, fragile illusion. In medieval Europe, life is brutal, unforgiving, and short. But even in the midst of relentless hardship, people carve out spaces of hope. When fields are barren and bellies are empty, when disease ravages villages and the church's grip feels suffocating, solace is found, not in comfort, but in art, music, and the age-old power of storytelling. These small acts of creation and tradition become lifelines, a way for ordinary people to assert their humanity in a world determined to grind them down. Storytelling is perhaps the most accessible form of escape. Around the hearth, in taverns, or beneath the open sky after a day's labor, tales are spun to lift spirits and forge bonds. Some are ancient myths, passed down through generations. Stories of trickster foxes, brave knights, or clever peasants outwitting their lords. Others are local legends, ghost stories whispered with a shiver, or cautionary tales laced with dark humor. These narratives offer more than entertainment. They teach, they warn, and most importantly, they allow people to imagine a world where wit and courage matter more than birth and power. Music, too, is a constant companion. Simple instruments like flutes, drums, and fiddles provide rhythm for dances during village festivals and communal gatherings. Songs are shared across classes, from raucous drinking ballads to haunting laments, each one a thread in the fabric of community life. Minstrels and troubadours travel from town to town, bringing news, satire, and romantic ballads that momentarily transport listeners beyond their immediate struggles. For a few precious moments, the harsh realities of medieval existence fade beneath the shared pulse of music. Folk rituals and communal traditions offer another form of hope. Seasonal festivals mark the turning of the year, blending pagan customs with Christian observances. May Day dances, harvest feasts, and solstice celebrations provide structured moments of collective joy. These events reaffirm the bonds of community, reminding people that, despite their individual hardships, they are part of something larger. Rituals might involve symbolic acts of renewal, lighting fires to chase away evil spirits, or weaving garlands to bless the fields. Small gestures of control over an uncontrollable world. Visual art, though often tied to religious devotion, offers its own form of solace. Stained glass windows, illuminated manuscripts, and carved church facades depict not just the grandeur of saints and kings, but also the lives of ordinary folk. Marginalia, the strange, often humorous doodles in the margins of manuscripts, reveal a glimpse of medieval humor and subversion, proof that even in the most solemn texts, people found space for playfulness and irreverence.